welcome back to the NASCC Qualifiers, a 2-0 to start off our day here. We've got another great matchup over the horizon. My name is Dolson, and I'll be casting with Mifflin here on this one. Always excited to sit down with it. They literally saw you on the crane going, Miff, we have to keep it together for even 10 seconds before we get into things here. That's right, at least through P's and B's, we got to keep things together here. The first set, very lopsided. Felt like that Vamps team just had all their ducks in a row going into this matchup here. This one, the Great Gentlemen up against the JAZZY Jaguars. But that is not the only match that we've got for you here this week. Miff, we've got 8 more for a grand total of 16 teams. Remember, this is a double elim tournament. We've got a winner's bracket and a loser's bracket. So, a little less pog dropping down to the loser's bracket. That is on the right side of your screen over there. Say again?
It's 7. We already did one. It's 7 more.
Right, 7 more. 8 total in North America, 8 total in EU.
Technically,
and so we've got 3 more matchups for you here today. Starting off the last 3, the Great Gentlemen up against the JAZZY Jaguars, and then Sturdy Artisans versus ET, and then Leoncitos versus DDD will round out our day here in North America, and then EU both tomorrow and on Saturday, of course, and then NA will round out on Sunday. So, Miff, now we get to talk about the Great Gentlemen up against the JAZZY Jaguars.
Yep. In
this Great Gentleman team, let's start there. Snatty, Sada Dragon, Tripno, Monster Bomber, and Hydrogen. So some of these names, if you're a fan of the SCC, the SOC, you'll definitely recognize some of the names on this team. Snatty played in that SPL qualifier tournament, fell a little bit short. Sada Dragon, Monster Bomber, same can be said about them as well. So now we're starting to see some of the teams, Miff, where you've had some individual members who tried to play through into that SPL qualifier tournament, fell a little bit short, and then have started to form teams with one another.
Yeah, and there's some decent name recognition here. I believe Sada Dragon was acting as a coach during the SPL play-ins. Monster Bomber has a very strong performance, and they're surrounded by guys who've been around the scene for a very long time. Tripno is a name that people should be pretty familiar with. The only standout to me, one that doesn't immediately ring any bells, is Hydrogen. I don't have much data on this guy. I got to assume that he's been working well with this team, and it's something that I'm sure that this squad will be able to work around, especially considering how much of a brain they have in Sada Dragon on this squad. If you ever watch that guy's stream, he is thinking more critically more often than just about anybody else. My man is stressing every single interaction in every single Smite game. There are not many people out there that, like, walk up, get first blood, and then watch back the VOD and like, man, I could have first blooded better.
I could have gotten a faster kill.
Should have killed him with less.
What do you think? I mean, obviously Sada Dragon, very mechanically skilled at Smite, obviously very mentally skilled at Smite as well. I wonder if that's difficult to turn off, like, the coach brain. You know what I mean? Like, it's got to be a transition from coach to player, especially jungler, where there's probably so much, like, coach thought going on in the head that kind of corralling that into a team player is probably a whole nother level of skill. That only you, Miff, I bet. Maybe Sada Dragon and you, I bet, could step up to that task. Let's talk about, though, the JAZZY Jaguars, early favorite for name of the weekend, in my opinion. This is Dishonored, Short Fuse, Panda Turtle, Bluegun, and Tuba. So I think very similar to the Great Gentleman, Miff. This JAZZY Jaguars team has some names you should recognize if you've been watching the SEC, if you've been watching the SOC in the past. In the duo lane, I think really stands out to me here. Bluegun and Tuba might be the standout players on this JAZZY Jaguars team.
Yeah, a team comprised of SEC lifers and some kind of fringe SPL talent that have kind of had a couple of performances here and there at the highest level of play. It is surprising to see Tuba on this squad because, if memory serves, I believe he was playing for the Funhavers during the SPL play-ins.
They had fun.
And they had a lot of fun. They performed incredibly well. And the 4-man core of that squad is still playing in this tournament because they did not qualify in the SPL, except now Tuba with the JAZZY Jaguars. I thought he performed very well. I figured that squad would stick together, but maybe not echoed between them as well. I've got high expectations for this team. I mean, these guys have been playing for a very long time. They've always found themselves at that SCC level. These guys are staple names, you should say, just at this level of play. I don't expect that to change.
Yeah, Bluegun, I think, stands out to me here as well. You're getting mid-lane replays here from Bluegun. He can play a variety of picks in that role. I think pretty flexible in his play style there as well. I do want to get your take, though, Miff. Jazzy Jaguars, do you agree? Early favorite for maybe name of the weekend? We've already seen Vamps, a little less Pog. Great gentlemen, Jazzy Jaguars. Let's just narrow it down to today.
Okay.
Sturdy Artisans, E.T., Leoncitos, and then DDD. Is Jazzy Jaguars your favorite out of the 8 teams that we're seeing today?
I think it comes down to a very, very nuanced discussion around DDD. Is it triple D? What do the Ds stand for? What do they stand for as a team? Once we get that knowledge, maybe we're going to have a little bit of a better ability to evaluate who's got the best squad name. But just surface level, keeping it real, book by the cover. Got to give it to the Jazzy Jaguars.
And if you're good at your job, I fed you a whole lot of nothing there, and you somehow stretch it into something. P's and B's for game number 1. One of these teams moving on in the winner's bracket. Mifflin made sure that I was on point. Winner's bracket and loser's bracket, because there's no upper and lower.
Is lame. That's lame.
There's no upper and lower. It's a winner's bracket and a loser's bracket. It's on the graphic, so I have to say it's on the graphic anyway. So you win. You win this time around, Mifflin.
Always.
Cirquette eats a ban early on here in picks and bans. There were some changes, right, from the SPL qualifier land that we saw recently. Some tweaks here and there on gods that we haven't seen very much. None of those gods have really seen much play. I imagine throughout today, maybe even tomorrow into this weekend with these matchups, it'll be a pretty similar meta to what we saw during that SPO qualifier land.
Yeah, the most recent bonus balance, I believe, is not live for this event, so Cirquette still has the capacity to go for that bruiser/full tank style of build and completely dominate in damage output.
Yep.
Now with the most recent changes, scaling kind of being the case for her, not going to be the exact same, but that's not where we're at. We're at tank Cirquette meta, which means that we're probably going to see a whole lot of Cirquette bans.
Yeah. This game number 1, no different. On the flip side, Amaterasu, a very popular ban during the SPL qualifier land, already in game number 1 takes a ban here by the Jazzy Jaguars. I do want to one last note on the names. I wonder if anyone on the Jazzy Jaguars is named Jack
or Jazz.
Or what? The odds of somebody being named Jazz but not Jack, I think, pretty limited.
Have you not seen Fresh Prince? I've personally never met a Jack in my life. But I have seen the Fresh Prince.
I'm racking my brain for one Jack that has come through the office or worked.
Not a single one.
The guy who works here named Jack is like crying right now.
Jack, I'm just kidding, man. I love you, bro.
We love Jack. Yeah, Jack Sparrow. That's a good point from production.
Pirates of the Caribbean is not as ubiquitous as the Fresh Prince. I'll go out on a limb for that, for sure.
Wow. I really want to bite. I really want to bite on that, but I'm not going to. We're going to catch back up with picks and bans here. Bacchus, Persephone, Bastet. Want to talk about some damage, Miff. You got some burst damage already loaded up here between Bacchus, Persephone, Bastet. Bacchus going to be obnoxious to deal with later on in the game. Question ends up being, I guess, is Bastet going into the jungle, or are we going to see another solo lane, full damage Bastet build?
God, Nika really just can't let junglers have anything, right? He took Bastet in the soul, and I feel like that's all.
That's it, though, right? I mean, he hasn't taken anything else.
No, he takes like all the assassins at some point.
I guess he does, right?
Yeah, he's just a.
I mean, it's effectively jungle Bastet. You're building it like jungle
all
Bastet,
damage.
just
in
the solo lane, I guess. So we'll see. It's going to be damage Bastet. Where it is
regardless
on the map, we're going to have to wait and see.
That's right.
Athena, Athena and Nike end up getting banned out there, and then Charybdis locked in here. So you got some safety over there in that duo lane with the Charybdis, but also plenty of burst damage, some good setup there. How do you feel about Bacchus and Charybdis being paired together here for the Jazzy Jaguars?
Generally, when I see a Bacchus get locked in, I want to see something matched up with it that is incredibly aggressive. And Charybdis has the capacity to get some aggressive play, especially if she's able to get themselves a lead. But from an even state, I don't feel like Charybdis dominates lane. She doesn't really have the greatest matchups, especially against something like a Chiron, who is very adept at taking these boxing matches very early on. So I think what we will see is Bacchus try and rotate out a little bit earlier on and then leave Charybdis to her own devices in the long lane, and she can utilize what is, for my money, probably some of the best safety in the entirety of Smite. Yep. Additional movement speed, CC immunity from the ultimate, additional movement speed, damage immunity, and CC immunity in the third ability as well. It's nearly impossible to fight a Charybdis unless she wants to fight you.
Miff, I do have an update.
Okay.
Sorry, Billy, who's working replays for us, has been very on point with giving us updates and information as it comes up. And so we have a DDD update from Donut Doug himself, who's on that team.
Donut of the Douglas? Or Douglas of the Donut?
I don't know about that, but I do have a DDD update.
Please.
So it doesn't really have a name, according to Donut Doug, but one tournament a long time ago, DDD stood for Donut Doug Diff.
Oh.
And then it turned into some donut something something, and this is a direct quote. So DDD, Donut Doug Diff, does that affect your naming ranks?
No, I think that honestly, it takes a hit. I was liking it better when I was just like Triple D, you know, like that's fine. Donut Doug Diff, yeah, that's lame. Jazzy Jaguars, congratulations. You may not win this game, you could, but you definitely won best name.
Miff, let's get in to game number 1 between the Jazzy Jaguars, the name champions of day number 1. Will they be the game 1 champions of our second set of the day? Remains to be seen. We'll do our jobs, catch back up though with picks and bans. We have a Bologna out of the solo lane, Miff, for Dishonored, and it will be short fuse on Bastet in the jungle. We've talked to, I mean, we've obviously seen the success of Bastet solo lane. I think certainly she still has her viability in the jungle.
Yeah, I mean, she's going to take a little bit longer to hit her stride. Bastet, a guy that really wants to get that itemization available to her early on. But the ability to find those ganks and make sure that you're forcing beads early on. You take a peek at what the Great Gentlemen have got. Not a whole lot of beads, which means the short fuse is going to have a lot of targets they can apply that ultimate to very easily. Could make it very easy for the Jazzy Jaguars to kind of leverage themselves throughout the early game. So keep your eyes on this Bastet the second she ticks over to level 5.
Yep.
I don't think pre-5 her jungle is incredibly potent, but the second she gets that ultimate, massive threat on the map.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the scaling looks for Sada Dragon as this game goes on. We've seen Kali plenty of times. We've seen late game Kali absolutely shred teams plenty of times. It's getting her to that near impossible to kill chainsaw style of point in the game, as we've so often referenced. There's plenty of range damage, though, even outside of the Kali myth for this Great Gentleman team. You look at Thoth, who has seen a massive increase in play, saw plenty of games during that SPL qualifier LAN. And then obviously with the ADC, you got Chiron there as well to confirm some of that long-range damage. So getting into the backline, going to be of high importance and maybe high difficulty here for this Jazzy Jaguars team.
It will be. I mean, you've got death immunity on 2 targets on the side of Great Gentleman. As we see a belt popped early, Tuba, he's in some trouble.
You just got to hit your autos here, and Hydrogen missing a few too many, and that's level 2 for Chiron. Frenzy used, Monster Bomber jumps in, but First Blood goes missing. Tuba stays alive, and you'll be able to farm up the back line there. Oh my god, and there's another update from Doug. Or from Doug, excuse me, from
he's
Billy.
on the camera.
Another update from Billy. So they ran a poll in chat, Miff. Which is better, Fresh Prince or Pirates of the Caribbean?
Jesus.
And Pirates won.
Well, here's the thing, Dave.
Handily, 2/3 to a third.
They've completely misrepresented the argument. I said ubiquity. More people are going to know about the Fresh Prince than they will about the Pirates of the Caribbean. But we're not worried about that
I don't
right
think
now.
that's true. I don't think that's true.
You know what I want to talk about, Dave?
What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about the jungle start
Tell
that
me.
we saw from Sada Dragon. It's not often that we see a jungler and soul laner go through speed, back camps, and blue together. I think it just tells me that Great Gentlemen don't really care about getting pressure in the solo or the middle of the map. They're just trying to farm out early, which means we could be looking at a more European-style game despite being in North America right now. The pacing for Great Gentlemen really going to favor an elongated match.
Are we assuming that means then that the Great Gentlemen have confidence in Tripno's ability to stay back, farm up, stay alive while Kali rotates elsewhere on the map?
I think so, especially with the new double penetration build for these mid laners. You can just kind of sit there. You can stay really far back, and Thoth having some of the longest range, if not the longest range in Smite, clear those waves pretty easily, and I don't think Persephone's going to put a whole lot of threat on them on her own.
That's a good point with Persephone, as Tripno does take a little chunk of damage, reaches level 4 safely, though. Has 1 pot left, but the red buff will spawn. He'll head on over with Sada Dragon, pick that one up. Haven't seen much Persephone, Miff. Again, I think saw a little bit during that SPL qualifier LAN. Felt very player dependent, has the ability to impact the game, impact the lane. But I don't think Persephone, post rework has reached the same level of immediate pick ban priority as what we saw. Think season 7. It was insta ban kind of across the board.
Talk about release Persephone.
Yeah, season 6 even. Whenever the peak of Persephone was just constant ban. It feels like hasn't quite seen that same level of presence here as of late.
Yeah, here's the thing about OG Persephone.
Yeah, tell me.
You would kill her, and then she would kill you because she would just walk around as a ghost, and an intangible object that dealt damage to you continually. It was the only god in the game that punished you for killing her first.
Could be jungle engage here. Both junglers level 5. Short Fuse sends the root out and wins the damage trade, but obviously Sada Dragon not interested in jumping back through. That's some good poke damage from Tripno, but no ultimate, no final judgment, immediately ready for the Thoth. You have to imagine after another wave, he'll reach level 5, but has to play defensively for the time being over in the middle lane as Sada Dragon rotates in to help out the Thoth.
Yeah, we're seeing a byproduct, Dave, of that early kind of prioritization of the jungle farm from Sada Dragon. It's kind of forced Tripno in a situation where he hasn't got any of the neutral farm. He's falling behind by default against Panda Turtle.
Good chunk damage onto Blugan here as Monster Bomber jumps over. Thought at level 1, it was level 2 for Hydrogen that we were going to see a first blood. Not there. Sada Dragon rooted in place by Panda Turtle sends the Persephone ultimate to the left side of the jungle. Destruction ready, not used, but it's the jump out. Short Fuse has ult, won't look for the grab on a Sada Dragon, so the Kali will live for the time being, but watch out. Bastet on the hunt. Looks like just going to steal some juice away from the Obelisk. Sada Dragon has something to say about it, though. Blink forward, jump out from Short Fuse, stun already used, and Sada Dragon cannot collapse in. Snipes from Hydrogen, close, and ranged confirmed damage closer, but Short Fuse lives to fight another day.
And that's going to cost Hydrogen a fair bit of his own farm in the lane. Tower going to soak that one up, and Blugan putting threat on the purple buff is going to keep Hydrogen there as well. Surprised to see Short Fuse step up so far. Maybe he was excited about the fact that he'd already finished up his Jotuns, whereas Sada Dragon was just sitting on the tier 2 mace. That 1v1 likely would have favored the Bastet, but in the duo lane, if you're fighting on that side of the map, it's almost never going to be a 1v1 in Season 9. There's so much farm over there. It keeps the supports kind of locked in the long lane for a little bit longer, which means that it's very easy for Monster Bomber or Blugan to get involved.
If, you know, and I'm glad you bring up the supports there. I'm going to pivot it a little bit towards the builds here. Looks like Monster Bomber, not even looks like it is, confirmed that Monster Bomber upgrades the belt totally right off the bat, delaying his initial starter item just a little bit there. You know, we've seen these Fafnir team comps. You love to group around, you know, objectives, shred them down with the Coerce, and you pop the Frenzy and just melt down the objectives. Is that what you think the mindset is here of this great gentleman team? You're putting gold early into upgrading that relic.
Yeah, I believe that is the tier 2 belt, so he's just getting a little bit more CDR on it.
Not the
going
final
forward.
one, right?
Yeah, we don't have the belt of insatiable hunger just yet, so we're going to have to wait out a little bit on that one. But Monster Bomber was the guy that we have directly quoted during the SPL play-in saying, my job as support is to just int. If it's for an objective, that's great. If it's for some flowers stealing away from their totem,
he's doing a bad job of that so far. He hasn't inted yet.
Yeah, get in there, Monster Bomber. He lied to us, I guess.
He did try at level 1.
True.
Right.
He did.
Hydrogen, a couple missed auto attacks away from first blood. But
I gotta call him out like that.
Yeah, well, I'm doing it anyway. Gauntlet of Thieves now completed for Monster Bomber and for Blugan as well, just a few stacks behind. So, you know, they're scaling certainly with Sada Dragon as the auto trade's not going in Hydrogen's favor. That's going to be a dash away from the Chiron as Tuba starting to spin up those wheels a little bit. Both hunters have Crusher completed. But talking about the scaling, Myth, you know, Kali, of course, has it. We've talked that every single time Kali ends up getting picked. Blugan is going to have a different type of scaling in the sense that late game Bacchus is going to be absurdly strong, but it's not so much in the damage department, though he'll be able to do that. It's going to require so much shred to work through all the protections that Blugan is going to have later in this game. So it feels like both teams kind of have a big core that they're looking forward to scaling up as the game goes on.
Yeah, but we got to talk about the direct matchups between some of these scalers, right? Like, sure, Bacchus is, bar none, the tankiest Guardian in the game at, like, the 40-minute mark. But we could see Great Gentleman with a double kind of physical. Maybe we see some kin size come through from Sada Dragon or even from Hydrogen. Could make it very hard for Blugan to play that aggressive style. Great CC lockdown from Great Gentleman as well. Means that Blugan needs to be very sure about his engage. It's going to be a belly flop in immediately into the Belch. You've got options from Snatty to cancel that out with his stun, or even Sada Dragon could do it on his own.
Another ultimate from the Persephone. This time it's on the right side of the mid lane. That's an early and a quick ultimate used by Tripno. First blood over to the JAZZY JACKUARS as Short Fuse jumps in, grabs the kill, puts the Thoth a little further behind and gets on out. So Bastet in the jungle this game, able to get an early kill on board 8 minutes in.
That's massive. The JAZZY Jaguars have already made it so hard for Tripno to farm up this game. He's already, by default, having fallen behind, now falling for first blood as well, means that Short Fuse should be able to close up some of that gap that Sada Dragon has established just by hyper-farming the jungle, but it's going to be even harder now for this Thoth to hit his stride, to find some of those damage items that he really needs to get the ball rolling. Whereas we've seen what the strategy is for Panda Turtle. It's stay as far back as possible, throw out that Grasp of Death, hope it connects with somebody, and then the rest of the team will just finish off your kills.
Yeah, it's been quiet over on the right here, Myth. Both solo laners have been able to go ahead and farm their way up. Bit of a difference, though, in the way that both of those builds are going. Vampiric Shroud early for Snatty in to that Breastplate of Valor. And a difference in the relic choices as well. Persistent Teleport ran the solo lane during that SPL qualifier LAN. This time, going to get picked up by Snatty, but Beads for Dishonored, Myth. Do you think that that's going to have an impact as this game goes on?
I was expecting Dishonored to pick up Beads, but I wasn't expecting it in the first slot. I don't feel like Sada Dragon is going to be rotating over towards the solo lane super often, and even if he was, Kali just has got the one stun. Bologna, with the CC immunity and the ultimate as well as just a standard leap, should be able to survive the majority of those scenarios. Even Monster Bomber Fafnir, I would argue CC light unless he's dedicating his ultimate, and if you are dedicating that ultimate in the soul lane,
yep,
I mean, you're feeling pretty good about that. The rest of your team can walk to the Gold Fury. I really feel like he would have benefited a lot from teleport early on.
Sure.
He could get back in lane, not miss out on as much farm, or put pressure elsewhere on the map by showing up. I feel like Beads this early was just a little bit superfluous. Second slot,
sure,
I can get behind. First, maybe a bit of a overcautious.
Sure, haven't seen the Beads find that much value out of the solo lane just yet. Quick pause in game one, quick unpause in game one as we jump back in. So we're 9.5 minutes in, Myth. You got this 1,000 gold lead or so for the JAZZY Jackуars. Are you worried if you're the great gentleman? You know, this is one of those types of games where it feels like you're putting a lot of emphasis on Sada Dragon later in the game, Tripno as well, get some of that penetration online. Are you worried about a 1,000 gold deficit at 10 minutes?
No, 1,000 gold with the scaling composition that the great gentlemen have got should have been expected, right? Like,
right.
If I'm great gentleman and I've got a Kali, a Thoth, and a Fafnir on my team, I'm saying, look, guys, as long as we're not like 6K down at 20, we're probably just going to win. That's how strong your team fight becomes once you get some of those itemizations online. So I'm sure they're just fine. And I can almost guarantee that's the conversation they're having right now. It would blow my mind if Sada Dragon hasn't said, hey, don't worry, just play it slow.
I don't know what happened to Tripno's HP bar there. I think Panda Turtle chunked it down a good bit. Tripno has just not felt comfortable at any point this game over in the mid lane. Has only died once, only the one kill in the game, but it feels like this Thoth has just taken so much pressure. One level behind now in lane. One level behind, though, is Monster Bomber underneath Blugan. So Blugan on rotations through, maybe the assist being the big difference maker there in that one. Just a moment ago, you see both teams grouping up around the Gold Fury, considering it. Sada Dragon into the destruction, and there's Final Judgment for Tripno. Gets this Thoth back on track, puts Panda Turtle in the grave for 25 seconds, and that is exactly what the mid lane needed for the great gentleman.
Yeah, that's going to be massive for Tripno to try and claw back some of that farm. Panda Turtle, though, does at least maintain his bead, so survivability's still there. Was able to use Grasp of Death to ignore the stun from Sada Dragon pretty well, but can't ignore damage, and Tripno's got that from downtown. Means that we're just going to see Persephone die to that pretty consistently. I'm thinking, unless somebody shows up, namely Blugan.
Yeah, Blugan's going to belch down about half of Tripno's HP bar. Myth, are you only tier 2 of the Odibo truther? You like buying tier 2 in the item and moving on, or do you feel like you like to complete the whole thing?
This is a conversation I've actually had ad nauseum with a guy named Oceans. He's also playing in this tournament. And I would argue that tier 2 Odibo, go for the Balance Blade. It's the Scream build, right? Like, we know that he loves going for this style. It works, okay? If that's how you've kind of made your team composition, if you're playing around that very early power spike around the Crusher immediately into that AoE damage, that's fine. But if you're not forcing team fights at every second of the game, the second you get that charged bow, I feel like you're missing out on a lot of value. And this kind of locks you out of the Hasten Katana tree. You're really slowing down Serrated Edge if that's something you're interested in as well. I think that this build can work, but you have to play around it, whereas just about every other build in Smite is plug and play.
For what it's worth, Sada Dragon got the charge bow, jumped into the mid lane, got a kill on a panda turtle.
That was like one guy, though. You didn't even get the passive.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. You're right. Haven't seen the team fight usage of the charge bow just yet. Could around the Gold Fury, though. JAZZY Jaguars grouping up on the left side of the map. Be interested to see where Dishonored goes, because remember, no persistent teleport. You're going to have to immediately go in to the Gold Fury from base or rotate out of lane if that's where you want to be. Pyromancer gets melted down by the Great Gentleman. No immediate Gold Fury pull by the JAZZY Jaguars, just searching for something on the left side of the jungle as the red buff is going to get taken down by Tripno. And Dishonored Myth sticks with it. No teleport on the second item either there, so defensive relics out of the solo lane for this Bellona. And so later in the game, especially around objectives and rotations, things like that, it's going to take Dishonored either losing some pressure over on the right side of the map or missing out on fights entirely outside of rotating and taking a little bit longer to get there. So maybe that's why we see JAZZY Jaguars slow playing around this Gold Fury just a little bit.
But even around these objective fights where you would think Dishonored has an advantage in having a team fight relic, giving your team an additional bit of HP and maybe some block stacks as well, I still think as long as Great Gentlemen slow play it, they're essentially going to have 2 HP bars for Snatty in every single fight because Persistent Teleport has got such a low cooldown. Send Snatty in first, apply some poke, heal up your team because you're Ardio, and she's wild like that. Go back to base once you've been dropped low, TP right back in. It feels like, as well, had Dishonored had Teleport, I think it's very unlikely that we see Great Gentlemen get away with that Pyromancer play.
Yep.
It would have been either immediately spotted out or rotated to by this Bellona. As of now, we don't really have the data to say whether or not this shell is going to find some value, but at least you've got the added benefit of having an auto attack composition on the other side. Kali going to struggle a little bit more getting onto those priority targets, but by that same note, I'm talking myself out of it now. Bellona is a diver. She's going to be going into the back line on her own. She's not hanging back and peeling. She doesn't have standard hard CC, so standing next to your Persephone, standing next to your Charybdis, not really going to be the highest value play for this Bellona, which means you're not getting the shell on them.
Right. Yeah, so relic choices. We'll see how they pay off for Dishonored and the rest of the JAZZY Jaguars as this game goes on. Wondered if we'd see a kin size for Sada Dragon. We sure do. So that'll make Blugan a little less survivable as this game goes on. As we've talked about the late game Bacchus and what that's going to bring for the JAZZY Jaguars, how difficult that'll be. So Sada Dragon starting to hit that stride a little bit, 15 minutes in, and the gold is back to even. How will it stand after this team fight, though? Sada Dragon jumped on immediately, destruction reached, but it's got to be defensive. The Kali is out of the fight immediately. Final Judgment charged up, but canceled out by Tripno. Snatty left alone, and that is a poke war that the JAZZY Jaguars are able to win.
Yeah, massive commitment from Great Gentlemen into damage onto Dishonored. Maybe trying to play around what we were talking about a moment ago. If you can poke him out, he has to walk back to the team fight. But he still is a Bellona at level 15 who is still incredibly tanky. You use all those resources, JAZZY can do it on their own.
That is a lot of damage from Tripno. That is all Tripno. Tripno does every bit of that himself. And Blugan is gone, up, down from Dishonored, and a pull back in. Puts Snatty right back in the lion's den in the back line. Hydrogen finds another kill here, and it's a jump forward from Monster Bomber. Disengage is the name of the game for the JAZZY Jaguars, but I'm not sure Dishonored will be able to. Hydrogen goes big in this fight, but all of it starts off with a pick from Tripno.
That's wild. I was talking over that fight because I thought to myself, surely he doesn't just stand there and tank Gold Fury and Tripno's entire kit throughout the fight, and he does. And then a phenomenal ultimate to finish off that kill from Tripno spells the go button for the Great Gentlemen. They run it down. Sada Dragon was able to reset, rejoin the fight, and pick up a kill on the tail end, and it all started around the Gold Fury. It's going to end there as well. Great Gentlemen pick themselves up the second neutral objective of this game, and the first Gold Fury, pushing this lead massive, all off the back of just allowing Tripno to do whatever he wants.
Yeah, massive gold lead now. 3,000 for the Great Gentlemen. So that kind of answers the question I levied to you earlier. How worried are we about a 1,000 gold lead or so for the JAZZY Jaguars? Your answer was not at all. Great Gentlemen agree. They pull far ahead of this fight and hitting big power spikes for different members of the Great Gentlemen now. The kin size did some work there for Sada Dragon on the back end. The double flat pen into the second tier of the book for Tripno. Felt very good in that fight. But an interesting build path, Myth, here from Hydrogen. You've gone Crusher into Transcendence. That's now fully stacked. and then a Soul Eater after the fact as well. So this stacking build is about to be finished off. The two big stacking items are going to be there, and Hydrogen is really going to start to swing as if he hasn't been already.
Yeah, I mean, you've got okay damage output. Soul Eater not exactly the greatest for that. It's not a wild amount of power. It's more so for that additional survivability, which is not something that Chiron really struggles with at all. I'm not certain how popular this Soul Eater build is, so I'm not going to go out on a limb and blow up my own spot here. But when I think about what Chiron is already doing, it's a lot of ability damage. It's a great deal of survivability because you've got death immunity in the ultimate Centaurus, and it's just the ability to stick around in these fights and apply damage from a very long range, very similar to how Thoth operates as well. And Soul Eater, I think, is an item that you pick up if you're a commitment style pick. If you're jumping in as a Bastet, you want to get that burst heal, so while you're in close proximity to your enemies, you're still survivable. I'm not sure that Chiron's going to be able to leverage it the exact same way, but if we are concerned about Chiron's ability on Great Gentlemen to take 1v1s against the dive of Jazzy Jaguars, maybe Dishonored shows up in the back line, and Hydrogen wants some survivability from his abilities, or if Short Fuse is able to isolate him, Soul Eater might find you some value there.
Let's see how Soul Eater does around the Pyromancer. That is taken low and confirmed by the Great Gentleman. Tripno does it again. It's a dash out, though, from Thoth as Short Fuse is on the hunt. But there is Peel, and it's Sada Dragon. The Peel, though, not in time. Short Fuse will get the kill and get out. Pyromancer taken by the Great Gentleman, but you've lost your mid laner. Blugan searching for more, though. Now to jump in. And that Bacchus is not looking all that tanky. Hydrogen has got the damage from the back. Tuba pops the Aegis, but his health bar is absolutely shredding. When Sada Dragon has got the space, he's got the damage. And that is a 4-man fight for the Great Gentleman, and it looks like a Fire Giant's on the menu.
Man, if I'm Short Fuse right now, I am tilted off the planet. My mental shatters, because that fight starts off for the Jazzy Jaguars with Short Fuse walking in and eliminating the threat that had won the Great Gentleman the last team fight. They remove Thoth from the map, they get out alive, and they reset. And what happens immediately afterward? Blugan goes in alone, misses the memo that it's a disengage time to get back towards that neutral objective, gets picked off, and the 3-man core of Jazzy Jaguars are like, well, he jumped in. We got to peel him out. We got to get there. We need to get involved. And they fall down in turn as well, leaving Short Fuse as the sole remaining member alive to watch the Fire Giant go to the Great Gentleman.
Hydrogen is popping off here in game number 1. 20 minutes in, 4:04 on Hydrogen as a quick pause rolls on through. And so the most recent completed item for Hydrogen, now a Titan's Bane. So we're on full ability damage right now. Crusher synergizes very well, of course, with that. Titan's Bane on the other end. And it feels like we've seen one of the two hefty scaling characters work out, and it's been the Kali that's looked good. Bacchus for Blugan has looked anything but tanky up to this point. It feels like it's just getting shredded in every fight. You can't really do what Bacchus wants to do. And the Great Gentlemen are in a great position here, Miff, to close out this game.
I think the lack of tankiness from Blugan is apparent in the build. He goes for Pridwin in that second slot, a little bit of defense both ways, but you are sacrificing a dedicated defense item for that additional power that Pridwin affords you as well, some of that CDR. You've also got to take a peek at the levels. Man's level 13. When Sada Dragon looks at him, that's a 7 levels up Kali who's already got kin size to itemize against you, shredding you in these team fights. Look at his magic defense. Not a whole lot of it because he's only got hybrid defense items. It means that Tripno from downtown can pepper some damage into this Bacchus, so he has to think twice before he engages in these fights. And we didn't see that in the last engagement. My man thought once, and he thought wrong.
Yeah, it feels like Tripno has hit a big power spike. Tripno's been the only target from the Jazzy Jaguars up to this point. It's been all in on diving this Thoth.
Speaking of.
For good reason. Tripno's got massive damage in the back pocket. Completed Soul Eater. 2 tiers of the Ob Shard. We'll see what he's able to do. Well, kill Blugan is the answer. This Thoth is officially a problem. Sends a final judgment right through Dishonored. The last bit of poke damage is there on the left. Snatty is just controlling the back line. And I think the Great Gentlemen want a little bit more. It's one big Gold Fury fight, and the game suddenly crumbles around it. The Great Gentlemen not worried about the mid lane Phoenix. You can't. There's still towers in the mid and right. And the Great Gentlemen group up into the Titan room they go. Tripno's got a triple. Into the fountain goes Panda Turtle, and I think the Penta might have to wait.
Quad?
Or will it? Oh, he gets the quad. The Penta surely was there, but the game more important. In game 1, over to the Great Gentlemen.
And it's worth kind of remembering how that game started for Tripno, right? It was hey, we're not going to prioritize you. Sada Dragon's going over to the soul lane. You're not getting any of that neutral farm. So we just see Tripno fall behind slowly. He falls down for first blood. Now he's 2 levels down at like the 6-minute mark. But it was just that slow, methodical play where it's, all right, we're going to scale up. We're going to get our damage output eventually. And by the time he got that second double penetration build item kind of available to him, he showed up to a Gold Fury and he made it work.
Yeah, think of that one fight and how that really changed up almost everything there in that game. There was a slight lead for the Jazzy Jaguars going into the Gold Fury fight. Blugan just couldn't operate as Abacus wanted to in that game. And the Great Gentleman snowball a great fight into a great game. And game number 1 in this best-of-3 set goes to the Great Gentleman. Can the Jazzy Jaguars, the name favorites of the day, bounce back in game 2? You gotta stick around and find out. This game is a bit slower to start, but ends up finishing in pretty rapid fashion after one Gold Fury fight goes the way of the Great Gentleman. That fight go so handily in the way of the great gentleman. Things snowball out of control there just a few moments later. Then the Pyromancer fight worked. Fire Giant after that. Easy as you like for the great gentleman in game number 1, but not always lost for the JAZZY JACKUARS, Mifflin, because it seemed like early on in this game there were opportunities to kind of push that lead forward, and those opportunities just never came to fruition.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of pieces that could have worked out a little bit better for the JAZZY JACKUARS throughout the early game. I wanted to see that Bastet get involved more so. There was only 2 beads on the side of Great Gentlemen, so there were plenty of people you could be CCing with that ultimate to try and set up for some kills, and the Soul Laner, I think, should have just had teleport. A couple of fights really go Great Gentleman's way because their Soul Laner was just there first.
We wondered how impactful those relics would be. Impactful as the game went on, but it was the carries dealing the damage, needless to say, and the Great Gentleman had a pair of carries in this game, even outside. If we're ignoring Sada Dragon, which you can't do because the Kali was very important. But
I'll try.
Right, we want to ignore the Kali. Felt like that was the plan for the JAZZY JACKUARS at times, because at an 8 KDA and 11,000 damage for Hydrogen, it felt like every single fight, Miff, this full ability damage build was just shredding the JAZZY JACKUARS. And that's not to mention Tripno, who died the most on this Great Gentleman team, still was able to do more damage. And by the closing of this game, the Thoth had officially reached critical mass, and the JAZZY JACKUARS just never had an answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we saw Hydrogen really benefit from the threat generated by Tripno. Man was the only one getting dove in every single team fight. Short Fuse was jumping on this Thoth religiously in these engagements. Even the Bologna in the very end does the exact same thing. And what happens? That leaves our boy Hydrogen just available to free cast the majority of these fights. And also having Death Immunity the ultimate means that if somebody did look his way, he'd have to work very, very hard to finish him off. Just a great composition from the Great Gentleman that was executed very well. It was clear from the offset. The plan was slow play the early, outscale in the team fight.
It was a tough game for Panda Turtle as well, Miff. Some of the emphasis of the JAZZY JACKUARS was around that mid lane. Panda Turtle did 18,000 damage. So you're looking at 5,000 more damage than anyone else in the game. But 0 kills. That damage was just unable to stick. That's a lot of damage from behind, so a lot of tanky members of the Great Gentleman were eating a lot of that 18,000 damage. And so there were times early in the game where I thought Persephone was going to make an impact. You know, there was an early kill onto Tripno in the mid lane. That just never built up into anything all that massive for the JAZZY JACKUARS. So now 1-0 down, the JAZZY JACKUARS back to the drawing board and some of their strategy here. The Great Gentlemen, I think, Miff, have shown us, even in NA, a region that loves to scrap and brawl and like massacre one another throughout the early minutes of the game. The Great Gentlemen have the ability to slow these games down, scale up some of these picks, and get to the mid to late game in a relatively safe manner. Will picks and bans for game 2 tell the same story? Or are we setting up for a little bit more chaos? We'll have to wait and find out. JAZZY JACKUARS are going to be in that first pick slot here. This time we've seen a lot of Bastet, or Circuit priority rather, in some of those first ban slots. We've seen Amaterasu taken off the table a good bit throughout some of these first bans. And I think a nice respect ban towards Tripno here. JAZZY JACKUARS not want to deal with that Thoth.
Look, in the current patch that we're playing on, Thoth and Agni are the standouts for me. They really, really just make it so hard to exist once they get their first 2 items online. I mean, the damage output from a range is just ridiculous. Objective secure, obviously there as well. So I think the JAZZY JACKUARS are right to put some respect on that pick, having seen now that Thoth is an option for the Great Gentleman. And Circuit on the other side, something you brought up. I think second pick is going to be banning Circuit all week. Nobody wants to play against a tank that does that much damage.
Yeah, no, I don't either, Miff.
No.
Spot on. Circuit, I imagine we'll see the ban column a good bit. I think it was first ban even from our first game of the day. Nobody wants to play Circuit. You'd love to play her if she's on your team, so maybe that's why you see her a little bit more in that second ban slot. Cabrakan, though, Miff, had seen ban presence in our first set, or in our first game, rather, even our first set. First pick, though. Are we in a world where Cabrakan is first pick worthy?
For me, personally...
You're not a Cabrakan truther?
I think that Cabrakan is incredibly strong. He's got great flex potential. When I see Cabrakan first pick here, I'm thinking to myself, okay, they want to see a little bit more of what Great Gentlemen are going to draft and try and pick some counter picks against it. Try and see if they can maybe see if they can limit exactly what the Great Gentlemen are going for. And Cabrakan does that very well because he doesn't have terribly bad matchups. If you kind of bait Great Gentlemen into thinking this Cabrakan's going one place, they might pick something in the soul lane for a counter pick to deal with the Tremor, or they might try and itemize or pick a little bit differently around the duo lane if they're worried that's going to be the support. So it's more so, hey, this Cabrakan lock-in it's a threat. We've got great flex potential, and you have to be worried about each one of these lanes until you see more of our draft.
If both teams have prioritized a few different things in their first 3 picks, Cabrakan, Medusa, Kleina, so you got jungle, ADC, and then some flex potential between solo and support there with the Cabrakan, we assume. Support for Fafnir, Gilgamesh. Bets are on that it's out of the jungle. Have seen solo lane Gilg once or twice. Ducky not on this team, though, so I have to imagine this Gilg will end up in the jungle. Persephone, Charybdis, Myth. That's already a pairing of carries that we've seen. It was on the losing side in game number 1. Do you think it was more just the nature of the game that took the win away from Persephone and Charybdis? I mean, are you surprised that despite losing in game 1 and beating it in game 1, Great Gentlemen go to it? I want to talk about the Vulcan, though, more than I want to hear your answer on that, because I did not expect to see a Vulcan. We saw, like, Doom Orb Vulcan a little bit a couple of years ago, maybe last year. But Vulcan has just not been picked, ever. But it's picked here in a must-win game for the JAZZY Jaguars.
Here's the thing about Vulcan.
Yeah,
he does a lot of damage. In these team fights, it's so easy to ignore the turret. He really shreds objectives. He's got some of the best objective secure in the game for mages, especially if ESET is not on the table, and JAZZY Jaguars have already banned it. But he is so easy to kill, especially with itemization not favoring him anymore. Doom Orb not great to pick up, so you're going for that penetration. Man's probably going to die a lot.
Game number 2 between the Great Gentlemen and the JAZZY Jaguars. We've got some unique picks. Maybe a unique pick. That's Panda Turtle out of the mid lane on the Vulcan. And I stand corrected here, Myth. It is not a Cabrakan solo and Kleina jungle. It is a Kleina solo Cabrakan jungle. So there is indeed a little bit more spice than we had initially thought here. So unique mid laner, unique solo lane pick. JAZZY Jaguars are throwing it all out here, seeing if they can get some momentum going in game 2.
Yeah, Kleina solo can work out. You're going to have just a very high damage output solo lane. I believe we're going to see Bastet go full damage as well. Dishonored really doesn't get a whole lot of value from going these tank items, so could be a very volatile lane where both of these guys, if either one of them falls, will continue to fall as that lane starts to snowball. Or we could see both of these players, Snatty and Dishonored, give each other a lot of respect and slow play it, just worried about the threat of damage from the other side. Hoping not. I love watching these contentious lanes, but I think more interesting is this matchup between Short Fuse and Sada Dragon, both playing very aggressive jungle picks, both playing picks that want to get involved around level 2, around level 3, start putting some pressure onto these mid laners. So when we have to talk about these mid laners, which one's safer? It's the one that has a jump.
Myth, I feel like Short Fuse, the more we say it, I do have to just shout this out. I think Short Fuse would be an awesome name for like a hero. Like isn't that an awesome like superhero name? Maybe a villain name? Short Fuse.
Does he have bomb powers?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I could get behind that.
Thank you. All right, just wanted to make sure you were supporting me on that one.
Crazy to think that's where your brain goes when we're casting.
Well, of course. I mean, my brain was on like naming.
All Might? Did you say All Might right there?
No, I said. Actually, I don't even remember what I said. I said something about my brain. There is still fighting though. Level 1/2 over in the duo lane. Hydrogen has got to get out of the fight. And Hydrogen does get out of the fight. So that's something we've seen a lot more often here, Myth. These level 1, level 2 fights, usually a frenzy or something gets used on that first wave to try to open up the fighting. Doesn't get used this time. Beluga has Blink, I believe. Shell for Monster Bomber. So a bit of a different look at the duo lane as far as relics go, but not as far as fighting early on.
Both beads lost from the Hunters means that Tuba and Hydrogen are going to be exposed to some ganks for the next couple of minutes, and with the duo lane having so much farm on this side of the map, it does incentivize junglers to head that way, and we're both aggressive junglers, so we could see either Short Fuse or Sada Dragon make that rotation. But worth noting, Monster Bomber still has that shell.
Tripno beats Panda Turtle on the fadeaway, grabs first blood for the Jazzy Jaguars. Tripno early in these laning phases, now in Game 1 and Game 2, has been under pressure. First blood now on the Great Gentleman mid laner in back-to-back games. And if you told me that one of the mids was going to die early in the lane, I would not have assumed that it would have been Persephone.
Yeah, but luckily for Panda Turtle, his jungler was there. Short Fuse showed up, and so it was so much easier for the Jazzy Jaguars to establish that pressure. It's 2 games now where we've seen the Great Gentleman completely seed the mid lane. Sada Dragon just not super interested in playing in that portion of the map, so that means that we're going to see Tripno get accosted throughout this portion of the match. That said, I'm not sure if it was the tremor from Short Fuse that kept Tripno in range. It looked to me like Tripno had escaped the tremor and then started juking immediately afterward. Had he just walked straight, I don't think that meatball would have connected.
But it did connect, Miff. And now we got Vulcan off to a 1-0 start, level 5, 1 level lead. Looks like the build will still be in the flat pen department. Just too much value out of that item tree right now for mid laners to do anything different. Tuba low here in this lane, but that's a great engage by Blue. Can grab some CC on both Monster Bomber and Hydrogen, but Tuba just too far away to follow up effectively. And so Horace Smith, another bit of the spice that's in this Jazzy Jaguars team, saw some play a couple weeks ago, and the ability to make an impact on these games with a Horus, especially in the laning phase. And then, of course, with the To the Skies, the ultimate, as the game goes on. I think important for Blugan to have a good bounce-back game here on this Horus. Just carries too much weight to kind of fall by the wayside in a similar way to what the Bacchus did. An opportunity, though, to have an impact. Short Fuse on the left side of the map. Blugan blinks through, and that is a lot of CC, but a lot of safety from the Charybdis. You just got to dodge autos, disarm in from Monster Bomber, and the duo lane lives despite a gank.
So hard to want to rotate to a lane that has Charybdis in it, right? I mean, props to Short Fuse for nearly being able to make it work, but Hydrogen doesn't even use his beats. He just says, hey, I'm going to survive this CC, and then I'm going to become damage immune nearly immediately, and he executed on that plan properly, walks himself out of there, and it cost Short Fuse his blink. I believe it cost the blink of Blugan as well, so the frontline engagement of the Jazzy Jaguars for the next 100 seconds going to take a major hit. Worth noting, though, on the opposite side of the map, I thought we'd see Snatty try and get aggressive, because Dishonored speeds are down as well. No CC immunity available to Kleena in her kit means that the cat from Bastet is going to drag her, but hasn't been used.
Man, Hydrogen has just been under so much pressure, but this time Blugan takes a hefty chunk of damage in return. Tripno ganked again, but this time Tripno survives. Ultimate is out, and that's locked Short Fuse in place, and Sada Dragon's there to turn around the kill. So an assist for Tripno, despite being engaged on by Short Fuse. And so the Cabrakan, little too aggressive, onto the wrong target, maybe didn't read Sada Dragon's rotation, and the Great Gentlemen are able to bounce back.
Yeah, I would argue that Sada Dragon has not ganked yet. He was just trying to get on top of his own timers. He was trying to get to those back camps. That's exactly where he was. And then, like 3 feet away, he notices that Short Fuse is on his side of the jungle, rotates in, and is able to return that kill. Whereas on the other end, we have seen Short Fuse make 3 attempted ganks in 5 minutes. That is a very, very quick pace for junglers, especially in Season 9. And it has cost him mightily in the XP department. We saw there, Short Fuse was still level 5 up against a level 6 Sada Dragon. Sada Dragon having not got involved in a single engagement means that's all coming just from farming the jungle. Now gets a kill for himself, as well as been farming the jungle better. Means that we're looking at an entire level lead, maybe about a level and a half for the Gilgamesh.
If I'm wondering, we've seen so much. As I'll hold this thought, see if Tuba can get anything done. Does not have ultimate, maybe not for another second or two. Just needs one more auto, and Tuba slithers forward, and Hydrogen goes down. Finally, a kill drops early in the duo lane. We've seen so much potential for that in these last couple of games. And that one, effectively a solo kill, but the health bar still low from an earlier fight, and Hydrogen not able, despite the safety of the Charybdis, to get out at the end of the day. 1 level lead, 1 kill lead over on the left. And Medusa, not one that you want to be behind against in lane.
No, not at all. And Tuba's going to have a pretty massive power spike on this back. Hydrogen wasn't even able to clear the wave before he died, and that was a stacked up wave, so massive experience gap going to be established in the dual lane as well. Tuba is going to be a threat, so we might see Great Gentlemen try and send somebody over, alleviate some of that pressure.
Monster Bomber has to jump away. Short Fuse, again, making an impact on this Cabrakan jungle. Divine Ruin to start off the build. So you've got some damage. Have seen Cabrakan start off with some damage. You build a little bit more hybrid as the game goes on, so that's something we'll have to keep tabs on. But Snaddy has had no problems here on the right side. Dishonored now poked entirely out. And that's where you're starting to see a little bit of pressure, Myth. We've seen pressure build up in the mid lane a little bit. 1 level lead for Panda Turtle, 1 level lead for Tuba. But Snaddy has just been comfortable, it feels like. Over on the right side of the map, this duo grouping should give purple buff over to the Great Gentleman. And that'll give Hydrogen a little bit of breathing room, catch back up in levels. But a 2-level lead now for Snaddy over in solo is still what catches my attention.
Yeah, Snaddy has been able to do no wrong on this side of the map, and I believe if he decides to, can go into that Jotun's Vigor and just out-sustain Dishonored. This poke war,
Oh my god.
yeah, you can expect to see that often. That is low commitment from Snaddy, and Dishonored doesn't have that same level of burst. Doug, can you show us the level priority from Dishonored, the Kleena out of the soul lane? I think maybe we'll see that she's going for the Flickering Visions, and it will be that case. So is able to at least poke from a range, but hasn't been playing at that range. It's Snaddy up close every single time.
Yep, Snaddy sends out the cat, chunks down half of Dishonored's HP, despite a little bit of physical protections there. Dishonored realizing, got to go a little tankier here in this lane, but it feels like if Snaddy is able to find an opening.
Great read.
Oh my
sick.
god!
So sick.
That is absurd burst. I did not expect that much. I thought Tripno might have been able to walk away. Hydrogen, can you turn this around onto Tuba? The stun would have opened that up. There are no beads for Tuba. Monster Bomber was rotating over, but watch out. There's a Horus ultimate dropping in as well. Blugan and Panda Turtle both here. But it does not look like there will be a commit under the tier 1 tower. But Panda Turtle in the mid lane, second kill of the game for the Vulcan. And it is a massive ultimate on a Tripno, despite being beneath the tier 1 tower.
It's just a great read of exactly what Tripno is going to do. Most people, when they're playing Vulcan in that scenario, they see the stun from short fuse and they put the ultimate right on top of the target, right? Panda Turtle's played enough Vulcan. He knows exactly what's going to happen. Tripno leaps away and leaps straight into an ultimate.
And that is a lot of damage. And that is a Divine Ruin and 2 tiers into the Doom Orb. Tripno not comfortable in this game. Persephone now in back-to-back games, despite big damage numbers, feels like has fallen by the wayside just a little bit. So Vulcan Myth starting to hit some power spikes here. I almost jokingly referenced Doom Orb on Vulcan that helped out his survivability a little bit the last time we saw this pick. But it looks like that's what Panda Turtle has in mind. Have to get Divine Ruin, have to get Flat Pen. But Doom Orb still has some value there for Panda Turtle at a mid.
Yeah, that additional movement speed, it still is a lot of power infused into your build as well, and I would argue still core on Vulcan, but once we see, or if rather, we see Tripno start to finish up some of his penetration items shortly, we will see some disparity in damage output. Vulcan should be able to shore it up just by having like another guy with him at all time, his bubble buddy,
right.
the turret there, especially around these neutral objectives, going to help you shred that one down. But as far as raw burst potential quickly, I think I'm still going to favor Tripno. Grasp of Death, very easy to line up, much harder to avoid than the Earth Shaker, as well as that Bone Rush. Means that Great Gentlemen, I think, can still find themselves in a position that is very similar to Game 1. They can just wait it out and try and get some of this scaling rolling.
Well, Myth, this game gold-wise dead even, and I think a lot of that is thanks to Snaddy over on the right side of the map. About a 700 or so net worth lead for Snaddy, and a little bit less than that is what Panda Turtle is over Tripno. So Snaddy pulling more of that gold back to the Great Gentleman. And so getting the Bastet involved then is what's important, because going to be a mid lane lead for the JAZZY Jackуars, going to be a slight lead over in the duo lane, specifically ADC as well for the JAZZY Jackуars. So you got to fight around your leads here if you're the Great Gentleman. But yet again, an example of no teleport on either at the moment of the solo laners. So maybe less impactful if neither of the solo laners have teleport. Both of them, at least at the start here, opting for defensive relics. Hydrogen thought there was an opening, but to the skies in from Blugan, but it's only Blugan. Short Fuse is already here. Tuba sends a Petrify in towards Sada Dragon, and Short Fuse picks up the kill. It's a Winds of Shamash down as the last death cry of the Great Gentleman jungler. Monster Bomber transforms. Short Fuse is low here. Tripno, the ability to impact this fight. Grab a kill. No good on the ultimate, but the damage is there. Now Tuba locked in place by Monster Bomber, but Blugan separating out this fight. But watch out. Here's Panda Turtle. Earth Shaker. No good on a Tripno this time. But on the wrong side of this fight is Hydrogen. Panda Turtle's got to use the beads. Nearly a fadeaway shot onto Hydrogen there. And the Jazzy Jaguars, they'll grab a kill onto the jungler, but they'll lose theirs as well. But this fight goes on.
Tripno uses the beads early on. He's moving up aggressive. Low is Tuba. Low is Panda Turtle, but maybe it's going to be Tripno who falls first.
Panda Turtle stays alive somehow, and there wasn't even an Aegis in that fight. Panda Turtle just got his Aegis back. Can Snatty pull something onto Dishonored? The answer is no. Peels away a little bit of that farm, but it ends up being a 2-for-1 trade. And the Jazzy Jaguars come out ahead on the left side fight, but again, just slightly. Experience still for the Great Gentleman. Gold still dead even. Gotta find a way to deal with this Vulcan if you're the Great Gentleman.
Man, Great Gentlemen just get over-aggressive there. Tripno, I think maybe making a calculated decision saying, hey, I'm already behind. My bounty isn't incredibly high, so if I trade my life out here, it's worth the risk if you're able to return a kill. Maybe it's not going to be worth the risk, though, as Gold Fury is getting shredded very quickly, and I don't see any gentlemen on this side of the map.
Nope. Jazzy Jaguars grab the Gold Fury, and that'll build up the biggest gold lead of the game so far, right about 1,000. It'll shrink back down, though. The Great Gentlemen are going to pull the Pyromancer. So these two teams feel closely matched in a way that the first set didn't. And so the Great Gentlemen have put on a great effort in game one, hanging in there here in game two, but the Jazzy Jaguars, namely Panda Turtle in the mid lane, have really controlled game two and have given the Jazzy Jaguars a great opportunity of bouncing back here. Panda Turtle is going to go back into some of that flat pen. I wondered if we were going to abandon that completely, end up moving into Soul Reaver, Obshard, things like that, but get the Doom Orb, go back to the flat pen, maybe a finish with a Soul Reaver and Obshard, something like that. Meanwhile, short fuse, Cabrakan out of the jungle, Myth. You're going to be doing a lot of burst damage here. You've stuck with the flat pen, you've gone Divine Ruin, Spear of Desolation, but does that worry you, the lack of tankiness on this Cabrakan? Do you think that's an opportunity for the Great Gentleman?
There are a couple of avenues of thought around Cabrakan. You can either go for the facilitator tanky setup. You got a lot of CC, a lot of lockdown, some walls to generate and create space. Or you go one shot, and you blink in, and you remove somebody from the map, and you immediately die. And you just pray that whoever you remove from the map was higher value than you. I think we're going to see that latter style of play from Short Fuse, and it's the one that I think is very exciting to watch. It's one that can really, really work out in some of these team fights. And there's some high priority targets that you would love for Short Fuse to just eviscerate. Namely Charybdis. Her greatest strength is her ability to, if she survives the initial burst of CC, to survive everything afterward, because she's so good at escaping these situations. I don't think that's going to work against a Cabrakan, who I'm assuming is going to be moving in towards that Polynomicon from that book pickup, which is just going to boost his burst by a whole lot. But I'm glad that you bring up the junglers, Dave. Look at the damage output from the two of these guys.
Yeah.
It's nothing. I really thought we'd
I had
see
to go
more.
so far down to find him. I couldn't. Sada Dragon deals a little bit more to Blukin, but it's just a little bit with the drop kick. Panda Turtle chunked down just a little bit out of the mid lane as well. But you're right. Junglers haven't had their impact on this game. A lot of it centered around mid. A lot of it centered around both of our hunters. And then, of course, Dishonored and Snatty have sent damage one another's way. Stuns exchanged, but Tripno, the one who has to use the beads, maybe didn't assume that there was going to be immediate follow-up. Transformation out of Monster Bomber here. Is this the Great Gentleman looking for a fight? Short Fuse takes a whole lot of damage.
That's
you
a great
love
ult.
a fight like this. If you're Tripno, you're in these jungle corridors, you can lock down the Jazzy Jaguars easily. Sada Dragon finds himself a good Winds of Shamash as well, but it is a disengage and a successful one at that from the Jazzy Jaguars, and actually some chunk damage from Dishonored on the back end of this fight, but Snatty not happy with how things have gone. Panda Turtle is going to turn it around, though, as Short Fuse is there, and just too much being done by the Great Gentleman, unable to finish off any of these kills.
And maybe the Jazzy Jaguars can finish off some own in their own
Blugan.
right. Blugan's up.
Where is he going to drop down? He's going to be on his own. It's important to look at here. That is into the Whirlpool for
Good
Hydrogen.
stun.
Another good stun, ultimate channeled as well, and so that should signal the disengage from the Great Gentleman. But in a way that this game has been even, Myth, the Great Gentlemen are now just starting to bleed out these individual kills, the slight one kill advantages for the Jazzy Jaguars in all these fights, and that's starting to build up a little bit further. Still around that 1,000 gold lead, but none of the last few engagements have really done anything for the Great Gentleman. That slow climb upwards in gold and XP, a worrying trend, especially if Snatty can't take advantage of that 2-level lead and give the Great Gentleman an edge in these fights.
Yeah, Snatty just gets over-aggressive in that fight, leaps in to try and apply some poke, and lands into his own death. I do want to highlight both mid laners come up massive in that team fight. Tripno comes up massive in that he starts the engagement by locking down 4 members of the JAZZY JACKUARS. And then what does Panda Turtle do in response? He doesn't aim his ultimate at the opposition. It was a legitimate zoning ultimate. He dropped it on the pathway that Great Gentleman would have had to have walked in through if they wanted to follow up on that damage from Tripno. And in that time where Earthshaker was kind of buying time, they're able to remove the Grasp of Death and reposition themselves, put themselves in their own red buff, and force Great Gentleman, force Snatty to overcommit on his poke. So great play from both mid laners there, but maybe a little bit better team play from the JAZZY JACKUARS. Poor communication from the Great Gentleman on where they're allowed to engage.
Oh my God.
What happened? Where'd he go?
He is missing, and Tripno now 1-4 here in this game. This Persephone, despite a little bit of mobility in that kid, is just not out of fun time. 1-4, now falling 1, make it 2 levels behind, and it is a complete difference in the mid lane. Panda Turtle at 4-0, and finished the Ob Shard. I wondered if it was another flat pen item. Was at the start. Ends up pivoting to percent pen later on. Great Gentlemen show up around this Fury, but the JAZZY JACKUARS will confirm it. Great Gentlemen have nothing to say about this. I think without your mid laner, you got to disengage. On the flip side of the coin, though, if you look at mid lane builds, Tripno at 1-4 is stuck entirely with flat pen. Haven't seen much Spear the Magus. But that's going to be the 3rd item completed for this Persephone, hoping to make some of that damage stick.
Yeah, man, you mark your target, and whoever you mark takes a whole lot of additional damage. Seems like Panda Turtle not struggling at all with his own damage output. Hits 1 ability onto Snatty, and Snatty forced to disengage. We'll see if the rest of the boys are as lucky here. Yeah. It's just the JAZZY JACKUARS establishing so much pressure on the map. At least Hydrogen can likely take out a tier 2.
Yeah, Hydrogen now 1 level lead over Tuba, despite Tuba having the lead in that lane throughout the majority of this game. Gold lead still there for the JAZZY JACKUARS, but gold lead still somewhat small, right around 2,000.
Hold
Gotta
up.
shrink a little bit because Panda Turtle gets shut
Can they do
down.
more?
It's 4-1 now for Panda Turtle, and that's a big shutdown for Snatty. Snatty has the ability to turn around some damage here, deals a lot to Tuba. Aegis will mitigate the damage from that Petrify, but watch out. Hydrogen is here, and Hydrogen has ultimate. Could be big damage from the Great Gentleman between the tier 1 and tier 2 tower. Ultimate does nothing, and Short Fuse calls him on it. Tuba ends up going down. Short Fuse should as well. Snatty's got another. This fight a bit messy, but for the first time this game, if in game 2, the Great Gentlemen come out ahead in numbers. A 3-for-2 fight and a shutdown on a Panda Turtle.
Yeah, and I think they were feeling themselves a little bit too much. They find that pick, and the Great Gentlemen say, oh, word, we can actually fight? It hasn't been looking so good for us in these last couple engagements. And we see Hydrogen kind of head-scratchingly just dash into the back line, just walks past the Cabrakan. You don't walk past the Cabrakan. You don't walk past the Cabrakan who's full damage and already has a Polynomicon. We saw what happened. Hydrogen just died for his transgressions, but the Great Gentlemen are at least able to transition a great pick into a couple more. It's a 3-for-2 trade overall, but I think had they just slow-played it a little bit, had they just kind of worked their way into the tower, they would have found objectives on the tail end of that Panda Turtle pick instead of a trade in the team fight.
How about a difference in mindset as well, builds here from the Hunters. Still Crusher, still Aussie, yes, but then we've got Odibo on one side for Hydrogen, and then Wind Demon for Tuba over on the flip side. Looks like a bow item 4th for both of the players here out of the duo lane, but a bit of a different mindset, at least at the moment. Pyromancer gets taken down a little bit ago, still well on its way to respawning, but you can sense some wind in the sails here of the Great Gentleman. Snatty jumps in and jumps out. Baits a little bit of an engage from the JAZZY JACKUARS. Pretty low commitment there from the Great Gentleman solo laner. But starting to group up around this Fire Giant. Don't have your Hunter, though. Hydrogen needs to group up and get back in this fight.
He does. There's nothing left to push over here on this side of the map. Tier 2 already removed, unless he wants to go to the Phoenix on his own, and I'm sure he does not. Tuba has already made his rotation, so the JAZZY JACKUARS are able to establish the defensive positioning around the Fire Giant. But look at wards in pocket. Not a whole lot of sentries. That's the first one dropped by the JAZZY JACKUARS to get vision control of the pit itself, but they're out now. Great Gentlemen have got great vision of the battlefield.
Miff, what do we think here? I do want to go. I was delaying just a bit to see how Hydrogen's build went. Haven't seen Silver Branch bow in a while. For a while, it was all Silver Branch, full bow build. Stim-based Hunters were all the rage. Hadn't seen much of the bow build, but Hydrogen seems to think that that's the right path at the moment.
Straight up ignoring the passive of Silver Branch with the most recent changes to it, it's just a great stat stick, man. I mean, the amount of damage output you get, I've heard it described as the selfish executioners.
Snatty misses the ultimate. Panda Turtle has to back away. Winds of Shamash down as well. So 2 ultimates committed in the mid lane from the Great Gentleman. You have to feel like that's a sign to head on out. Able to deal some damage. And finally knock down that tier 1 tower, though. So a little bit of gold fusing back. And where it was about a 2,000 gold lead myth for the Jazzy Jaguars, is now a gold lead. Slight, but still a gold lead for the Great Gentleman. And an XP lead for the Great Gentleman. Panda Turtle just 1 level ahead, despite having a 3-kill lead over the mid lane counterpart. 1 and 4 is Tripno, only 1 level behind. 1 level lead in Hunter for the Great Gentleman. The turnaround of this game is there. And it's here. It's already happened. And you wonder if the Jazzy Jaguars may have missed their opening, missed their opportunity.
Yeah, just kind of let off the gas for a while there. They weren't exploiting some of these early game fights. We saw Tuba really wanted to rotate, get involved in these team fights, move over towards the Pyromancer, get involved in the mid 3v3s, and in doing so, allowed Hydrogen to clear out some towers, close up that entire gap that Tuba had established for himself. And because Hydrogen got towers, he tier 1 and tier 2, he infused the rest of his team with golden experience, which really closed this one up. From there, the Jazzy Jaguars have not quite been able to reestablish their footing, especially around this Fire Giant. I would have argued, even just 3-4 minutes ago, Jazzy Jaguars would have been heavily prioritized, heavily favored in engagement around the Fire Giant pit, but because of the vision dominance that Great Gentlemen have got, great highlights, Doug, they haven't been able to move up, Jazzy Jaguars, that is. Every single step they take forward, they're met with poke. They're met with opposition. Every step is hard fought, and that's not exactly the position you want to be in if you're stepping up to a neutral objective.
Yeah, despite 1 and 4, Myth, I'm glad you bring up poke here because that's something Tripno's still been able to do despite being a little bit behind here in this game. And controlling the jungle fights is already something we saw Persephone do on the left side of the mid lane. Absolutely something you have to be worried about if you're the Jazzy Jaguars on the right side of the map. This Persephone and that ultimate and the lockdown and the beads burning potential that it provides. Very scary for the Jazzy Jaguars, especially if you're Panda Turtle, who doesn't have any of those actives right now. So if you're the mid laner, the eye of all of the Great Gentlemen, you're this Vulcan who was 4-0. Got to be careful for the next 30 seconds or so. Both of those actives now on cooldown. But the Great Gentleman poked a little bit of damage into the Fire Giant. They'll end up backing themselves away and regrouping maybe one more time.
We saw a small skirmish there where Short Fuse spots out Sada Dragon trying to loop around that engagement and utilizes his blink. The Cabrakan uses his blink on what is essentially a full tank Gilgamesh jungle that has done 0 damage this game. You are the best picker on your team in Short Fuse. You want to shut down Hydrogen, you want to shut down Tripno, you want to lock down these priority targets, especially with Snatty jumping as aggressively as he has been in these team fights. But instead he goes on Sada. Sada takes maybe 10% of his HP, leaps out and says, word, we don't have to worry about this Cabrakan anymore because he's not able to just W key through these fights because of his build being all damage. This man is incredibly squishy. That is a massive loss for the Jazzy Jaguars for the next entire minute.
I guess you can make an argument for a hybrid build for Dishonored, but it's really just the Breastplate of Valor and then tankiness on the other side of that.
Uh-oh.
I was about to ask if you think Blugan is tanky enough to be the only tank for the Jazzy Jaguars, because everyone else is in some sort of damage. That was some free chunk damage from Hydrogen onto Blugan, who's now half HP, has to back away. TKO'd from this fight. There's a stun there from Monster Bomber as well. Dropkick is in, and the one tank that the Jazzy Jaguars have is being melted down. Snatty unable to get out of the fight, though. The Tremors big from Short Fuse. On the right side of the fight, things good for the Great Gentleman. On the left side, things good for the Jazzy Jaguars. But the right is looking better. Sada Dragon's got a triple. Panda Turtle takes one with him. Another 3-for-2 win for the Great Gentleman.
I am fully convinced that Snatty is a psychopath, man. He just keeps leaping in. He just keeps getting poked out for his trouble, but it's buying space for the rest of his team. Sada Dragon gets involved probably for the first time so far, picks himself up a triple, and creates the space for just this. Fire Giant pulled out. Hydrogen still full HP. This is going to burn very quickly, and Dishonored, having gone hybrid, doesn't have the greatest steal potential.
Fire Giant low, Dishonored close.
That's your steal. He uses it for damage?
Damage on to Hydrogen.
What?
Was the option. And
What?
I agree. A lackluster steal attempt as the Great Gentlemen are able to lock it in on Tripno, Monster Bomber, and Hydrogen. So 3 members of the Great Gentlemen now get FG. They're down 3 kills, but they're up big in gold. They're up big in Fire Giant. And the story of a turnaround.
What?
In game number 2 for the Great Gentleman. Myth.
He ate all the
reeling
nachos?
a bit.
What?
At the thought process there from the cleanup.
Look, the thought process from Dishonored was, that guy can't have Fire Giant if he's dead.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he was full HP, and you're not one-shotting him with that ultimate. And Kleena is very good at stealing objectives, because you can sit in a wall and nobody can stop you. He could have stayed in that pillar nearly indefinitely, considering the amount of HP he had at that moment, which would have been, I think, maybe enough threat that the Great Gentleman either say, we're coin-tossing it, and we have to be worried about this Kleena steal with that ultimate, or we just wait it out, it buys them a lot of time, and the JAZZY JACKUARS may have been able to regroup and stop the Fire Giant. But instead, he tossed it out for damage, and the Great Gentleman say, oh, word, that's awesome for us. I've never been happier about anything in my entire life. Shut down the Fire Giant, back up, and now they've got it on 3 core members, the carries, Tripno, and Hydrogen. Even, I would argue, one of the most important members, Monster Bomber, your primary tank, going to benefit from that HP 5 that Fire Giant gives you, which means he could just tank up these objectives and start working through the entirety of the map.
Remember, this was the type of moment in game 1 where the Great Gentleman just ended things quickly. They got 1 good fight under an exposed Phoenix. There are 2 tier 2 towers left in game 1 when the Great Gentleman ended that game. And now you've got 2 minutes, 15 seconds even, with a Fire Giant buff to walk on in. As this game approaches the 30-minute mark, still not full build for anyone in this game except for Sada Dragon, who's built up enough gold there. Got to push in some minions here in the mid lane tier 2 tower. Both actives about to come back up from Panda Turtle. Looks like everyone else in the game will have their relics ready to go as well. So you're going to be fully stocked up going into this next fight. Got to be on Panda Turtle, Myth. We have seen big damage numbers from this Vulcan as this game has gone on. The Earthshaker has got to be big. Cleave down some of that damage. It's a second wind engagements. The last bit of damage from Panda Turtle that have kept these fights close here as of late.
Yeah, and also keep your eyes on Short Fuse. He still has one-shot potential. It's just whether or not he can connect with these priority targets. We haven't seen it in a little while, but that doesn't mean that threat isn't still there. If Short Fuse can't hit pay dirt, if Panda Turtle can't do it, I don't see the JAZZY JACKUARS doing it. And the Great Gentlemen seem to be very cognizant of that fact. They are slow playing these Phoenixes.
Got to get your damage to connect. Blugan realizing that the hard way, that some damage can connect onto him as well. Going to be without a wave here for just a second. Things will take a bit of a breather. 1 minute left on the Fire Giant buff. You would love to get a Phoenix here. I mean, the first FG is always the setup Fire Giant, sometimes the game-ending Fire Giant, of course.
Here's
but
the engage.
Where are we looking? Short Fuse is looking in the mid lane. Snatty is gone. Do you have enough damage to get the left side Phoenix down? That's an Aegis used by Tripno. At least mitigated the damage out from the Earthshaker. Re-engage from Blugan. Short Fuse is there as well. Snatty was evaporated by Short Fuse already. Aegis is still there. I stand corrected for Tripno. Might need it on the back end of this fight. Uses it as Tuba walks on forward, and Tuba snags a kill. Now mid and solo gone for the Great Gentleman.
Only needed one of those 2 key components to a dub to connect for the JAZZY JACKUARS. It either had to be the Vulcan or it had to be the Cabrakan. This time it was the Cabrakan. Snatty jumps aggressively to clear a wave. Maybe don't use your escape on Phoenix line. And gets punished for it mightily. Short Fuse shuts him down and then is able to rotate back in towards that team fight. Now the Great Gentlemen are reeling. Take a peek at the relics. I don't know. None available to the Chaos squad right now. JAZZY JACKUARS at least have every single defensive relic still available to Panda Turtle, and Bead still up on Short Fuse means that they can push out and even potentially look for a little bit more here. No neutral objectives up on this side of the map means that JAZZY JACKUARS should just reset from here, but no Phoenix for Great Gentlemen. It's going to be a completely even team fight yet again around the Fire Giant. And I'd argue 30 minutes in, 5,000 gold differential doesn't exist. It's not a differential. We're looking at nothing here.
Yeah, Tripno still hasn't finished off that build, so gold's still mattering a bit for the mid lane Persephone. You get the tier 2 item on the ob shard, so you can grab some of that flat pen anyway. Now it's time for the playmakers to make plays, though. When the game gets to this point, if you want to avoid going down to the loser's bracket, if you're the JAZZY JACKUARS, you need Short Fuse to have a play like that again. I mean, look at the KDAs. It's been Panda Turtle and Short Fuse as this game has gone on. The ebbs and flows have still revolved around the Cabrakan and revolved around Panda Turtle. Snatty misses the ultimate. That is huge. and Panda Turtle doesn't even have to use either of the actives. So now Snatty's got to jump in as he is there.
Jesus.
It's a double collapse onto Snatty. You see how much pressure there is, but also the immediate reply from the Jazzy Jaguars to peel out for their mid laner.
Yeah, Snatty has been generating a lot of threat on the map. Sometimes he jumps in, deals some damage, and survives. Other times he jumps in and dies. This time, it was the Prior, and Snatty is able to create a little bit of space, but to no avail. Jazzy Jaguars still pick up the Pyromancers for themselves, and Snatty still does not have that ultimate available.
Enough space created by the Great Gentleman, though, to pull out the Fire Giant. You imagine it gets dropped here. Shortly after, Blugan looking for the engage onto Snatty, who goes up and over. That's a good Winds of Shamash from Sada Dragon, as Blugan melting away, but so is Short Fuse, and the Cabrakan is gone. The Great Gentlemen have killed off one of the biggest two threats here in this team fight, and now it can be a re-engage. Tuba locked in place. Dishonored will die where he stands, and now when you see Hydrogen whirlpooling forward, the fight is not going in your favor. Dishonored and Short Fuse are gone, and the Great Gentlemen have eyes for the enhanced Fire Giant.
Short Fuse got a little bit of what I like to call hero play syndrome. He comes up huge for his team on Phoenix defense and says, okay, that's the first team fight we've won legitimately in the last 15 minutes. I have to do it again. I have to get in there. It has to be me that starts off this fight. And he goes in, nearly alone, drags Dishonored forward with him, and cost Dishonored his life, cost himself his own life. 20 seconds spent in the grayscale to consider those mistakes, and this time the Great Gentlemen not only get Fire Giant, but for all 5 members enhanced this time around as well. This Phoenix, foregone conclusion.
Yeah, should be, especially with the timers. But this is where you got to be careful. For the Great Gentlemen, gotta be cognizant of the respawns that are coming in. It's a 3 versus 5 now, but it's a 4 versus 5 as we speak, and soon after it'll be a 5 versus 5 again. But a breath of fresh air. You're able to get a couple of kills with long enough death timers that makes that Phoenix Siege go so much easier, especially after the repelled Phoenix Siege just a bit ago. And with plenty of time left on the enhanced Fire Giant, plenty of gold in hand, 2,000 at least. Gonna finish off those builds, Miff, and the Jazzy Jaguars staring down the losers bracket. They can't make a miracle happen.
And we've seen that their defense is not weak. Last time it was Short Fuse that finds the one shot onto Snatty. That opportunity is still there. Snatty has not gotten any tankier, and if anything, Short Fuse has only gotten stronger since then. So there is that potential. You still have Panda Turtle, who was able to force out some relics with the Earthshaker. Now maybe he's able to connect that damage, can just remove somebody from the map. And take a peek at the builds of Short Fuse and Panda Turtle. Last item, a little bit of defense for both of these guys. A little bit of survivability. CC immunity from the passive of Mantle of Discord, as well as that stun, means that these close-range targets, Sada Dragon, Snatty, when they engage, are going to have a hard time finishing off these kills. Could be the difference maker in some of these late-game knife's edge team fights.
Yep.
But this late-game team fight is pretty simple because there's only one objective on the map that I imagine we see the Great Gentlemen go for, and it's the left side Phoenix. Maybe, if they're lucky, they can work their way into the Titan, but I'm sure we'll see them funnel through the left side first.
Plenty of beads, Miff, that need to be burnt. Great Gentlemen have upgraded all 4 sets of beads to the exact same one. Jazzy Jaguars have just not had the same amount of gold yet. Still either upgraded or standard beads for a couple of the carries. And so now you get later in the game, some of those upgrades, the full upgrades on the relics could be difference makers as well. Gem of Isolation out for Monster Bomber. Just want to point out that that's annoying for the Great Gentlemen as they walk into the base of the Jazzy Jaguars. Can the Great Gentlemen complete the turnaround? Can they move on in the winner's bracket, send the Jazzy Jaguars down to the loser's bracket despite what felt like a commanding early game lead? It's not a great start. Hydrogen taking some chunk damage. Earthshaker out. Blugan evaporates though, and Earthshaker does not do what it needed to do. Hydrogen down in the earth, and he will spring forth with half of his HP. The early pick though goes over to the Great Gentlemen.
Fire Giant going to be re-sustaining Great Gentlemen,
their
but
tank.
they don't need it. They can just walk their way in. Left side
Whoa!
Phoenix will fall down, and what happened to the Titan?
I don't know. The Titan, 2 fire waves, I guess, got a lot of that done. Without Blugan, you've got no tank. Simple as that. The Jazzy Jaguars do not have the health bar to stand up underneath their own Titan. The Great Gentlemen complete the turnaround, and they will finish this set 2-0 over the Jazzy Jaguars.
Just wild mental fortitude from the Great Gentlemen. Both games are turnaround matches where they fall behind in the early. They have to claw their way back through every single step, every small win to reestablish a neutral state, and finally below the game open with a Fire Giant or a Gold Fury. But there is one weakness potentially exposed to the rest of the teams that were watching this, and it's these games go long. This is a team that really likes to play around their late game scaling. They really want to play around the 5-on-5 engagement and maybe sacrificing a little bit of that laning phase.
And Miff, that didn't feel quite as chaotic as some of the North American SEC games that we've seen. Not quite as big a bloodbath, longer, more calculated, more drawn out. But it's the great gentlemen who are able to benefit both in Game 1 and in Game 2. So they'll take this set 2-0. We will take a break. When we come back, we'll break it down. We have learned a couple of things in our second set of the day. First and foremost, the great gentleman, good at turning games around. In both Games 1 and Game 2, there's a lead in place for the JAZZY JACKUARS, and then in both Games 1 and Game 2, the great gentleman able to turn things around. Game 2 takes a little bit longer, but still a win nonetheless. That's only the first thing we learned, though. You're still waiting for the second
man.
thing. The second thing we learned is Short Fuse is a villain. A villain from the Fairly Odd Parents. Thanks again to Billy. And you know what? I I take a small bit of pride in that because I totally didn't know that, and just off the top of my head, I'm thinking that'd be a really good hero or a villain name, and it's actually one. And so I think I deserve a little bit of praise from you, Mifflin, directly. And
Good,
so I'm gonna
good job, Dave. I'm really proud of you for recognizing the brand ability of Short Fuse's name.
That is fantastic, and I appreciate you there for you, Miff. Let's
Let's appreciate each other.
Let's appreciate each other. Let's jump into the replays for game number 2, because that's why we're all here. The great gentleman able to turn this one around as well. I believe end the game in a kill deficit. Never had the kill lead in this one. I think Sada Dragon slow to start off here in this game. Think about the damage numbers that we didn't see from the Gilgamesh, but a whole lot of this as this game went on.
Yeah, the second he got tanky, he said, oh yeah, I can start getting involved, and he does exactly that. It was hard for him to work his way into some of these team fights because Panda Turtle was always on the lookout, but once he did get rolling, Sada Dragon really did start separating these engagements. The wins of Shamash were really good zoning tools. We saw it in the first Fire Giant Siege, where he was able to drop that one and force Short Fuse into a poor position. We saw it towards the tail end as well, kind of isolating individual members of the JAZZY Jaguars. But my standout for this one had got to be Snatty, man. We didn't see a whole lot of ultimates.
For better or for worse, right?
Yeah, we didn't see a whole lot of ultimates from him, but he was creating a lot of space. He was getting involved. He was jumping in. He was never deterred. He fell down. He got soloed. He got back up. He wiped the dirt off.
There you go.
And he got involved.
There was an ultimate on that one.
Yeah,
Brought Blugan back.
One of 3.
Yeah, one of.
Did you get all of them, Billy? No, he got 1.
That might have been all of them.
Might have been.
Well, look, Snatty controlled that laning phase, right? 4-3 and 2
Dominated.
doesn't do justice to the lane, where Snatty just completely dominated Dishonored, who was never able to get, I'll say, relevant on the clean. I mean, 17,000 damage is always going to be some type of relevant, but never really connected in a meaningful way. Felt like it was Short Fuse and Panda Turtle who had to step up in those fights. Sometimes they were able to, other times they were not able to. So, unfortunately, after day 1, our day 1 name winners, the JAZZY Jackуарс, down into the losers bracket. They'll have a chance to allow me to say that name a few more times this week if they're able to continue winning. But the good news is, as far as the bracket goes, that the great gentlemen are moving on, and they will be playing the set 1 winners, the Vamps. I would be nervous going up against the Vamps, to be honest, after what I saw in that first set. I mean, complete domination over a little less Pog. And so Little Less Pog and the JAZZY Jackуарс will be facing off in the first round of the losers bracket over here in North America. A couple 2-0s to start off our day here in the North American SCC qualifiers. Vamps and Great Gentlemen both winning those. And I think, Miff, now a couple back-to-back games between the Sturdy Artisans, ET, Leoncitos, and DDD. A couple of teams in there, I think that'll be...
Name.
What was it? Donut Doug Domination? No, Donut Doug Diff.
Yeah, you knew it.
Is what that was.
He knew it, Chad.
But some fan-favorite teams coming up here in our next couple of sets. Relentless One, Sino, Maswal, Gino, Griff. That's the Sturdy Artisans going up against an up-and-coming team in ET. And then our final set of the day, the Leoncitos, Heed, Leon, Spreen, Hurrywin, Snoopy going up against DDD, the Donut Doug Diff. So some fan favorites coming up to round out our day here in the North American SCC qualifiers. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back.